This is the next in our series of Griffin Greats. And today I have the great pleasure of having Chris Deutsch, class of 93, as our Griffin Great. And I remember very, very well meeting Chris for the first time. The very first year I was at Roycemore, so I'm now in my third year. So 3 years ago, I went into the city and met Chris down at 1871. Saw T-Bot for the first time, which we'll let him talk about what T-Bot is, and learned a lot about Chris and what makes him tick. And we'll talk about Chris's history so that he can share that with you rather than me kind of going through all of that. But trust me, you are going to be very thrilled to have the opportunity to learn about this remarkable man who has done so much with his life since graduating from Roycemore and kind of how it has impacted him. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Adrian. Far too kind. Thank you for the really, really thoughtful introduction. I remember that tea as well at 1871. And for those that don't know what 1871 is, it's the #1 ranked incubator, I think, associated with universities in the world. So it's huge. It's like 150,000 square feet in the merchandise mart. But I remember that very well. And I remember thinking, wow, what a fantastic fit for Roycemore. I couldn't think of a better head of school than you are. So thank you for taking the mantle.
Well, you're very kind, and it's such a thrill for me to have the opportunity to lead a school that has produced such remarkable alumni like you, Chris, who, if you don't know, Chris was our distinguished alumnus a couple of years ago and deserved that honor very much for all of his work in starting up new companies. Chris is an angel investor with very early stage startups and helps young entrepreneurs kind of make their visions a reality and gives them the fuel to take off. And I would say that meeting someone like you, Chris, who kind of can see that in people and help them make connections and leverage their talent in beautiful ways. You set a model for what other angel investors can do. And I think you do it with such integrity and incredible leadership qualities and compassion in doing it the right way. Because we know there's a lot of kind of venture capital folks out there who are not as kind and don't approach it the way that you do. And I think you really set an incredible model for how it can be done. And it fits so well with Chicago and who we are as authentic Midwesterners. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Lofty Ventures, and while you're talking about the business, I'm going to post in the chat a link to an interview that Chris had this summer that goes into a lot of detail about his philosophy around the company and investing. But so you want to do a deep dive, you definitely want to go and listen to that. But listen to Chris first here, and then you can go dive more deeply. But Chris, share with us a little bit about what Lofty Ventures does.
Sure. I'll keep this as brief as I can. First off, the name has some significance. So my father brought the concept of loft office space from New York to Chicago in the 60s and named the company Loft Development Corporation. And I moved back to Chicago 7 years ago to work in our family business, which I never thought in a million years I'd work in real estate. I've been in tech forever. But I ended up coming back to Chicago to work in our business. We subsequently sold that business about 4 years ago, and actually almost exactly 4 years ago now. And shortly after, actually before we sold that, I was doing angel investing in Chicago-based companies that were, and the reason they were Chicago-based companies is any of the companies that we invested in could potentially be tenants in our buildings. And so that is what kind of got me started with the focus on Chicago. And then once we sold our real estate business, I didn't have that need anymore to focus on Chicago, but it really became a desire. And there were a lot of reasons why I decided to stay with that focus and why I decided to go full-time into angel investing. But a couple that I'll rattle off quickly. One, since I started creating this family, I really call it a family of founders in Chicago, it, barring COVID now, a little bit of a weird time, but when they're in Chicago, I can physically bring them together more and I could roll up my sleeves and get more involved. So that was very attractive and interesting. Two, there is you mentioned this a little bit, there's a different ethos, there's a different fabric that Midwestern and very specifically Chicago entrepreneurs are crafted from. And I really appreciate that. And I want to continue that. And also really importantly, Chicago has a lot of problems. We're a great city, but there are massive problems that need to be solved. And the way that those are going to be solved are creating jobs, creating more tax base. And the way that we can do that is not just by investing in nonprofits and attracting other big companies here, but also building organically from the inside out or attracting entrepreneurs to come here and build their companies in Chicago. And so I'm hyper focused on that. And actually I've got some good news, which you probably haven't heard yet. One of the companies that did grow and actually was a tenant in one of our buildings just exited 3 weeks ago. And it was a very successful exit for the founders, thankfully for Lofty and for myself. But what's even more important is when you have exits like that, and an exit, for those that don't know what an exit is basically means there was a financial transaction where some entity, in this case it was a private equity firm, came in and bought out a majority interest in this company. That provided tons of cash to the founders, to employees, to other investors, et cetera. And that money will then sprinkle across the economic landscape in Chicago. And so this really is starting to show that the model that I've been trying to pilot with Lofty Ventures, focusing on Chicago-based founders and growing those companies and creating a multiplier effect, is actually starting to work. So anyway, I'll also say, last thing I'll say about Lofty Ventures is today we have over 45 companies now in the portfolio, or the family as I like to call it. And that's about 71 or 72 founders. By end of year, that'll be over 50 companies and probably 80 plus founders. And what my focus is as an angel investor, I don't have LPs, I'm investing direct. I'm looking for first check to seed, which is incredibly early in the process, much earlier than most other investors want to get involved. And I'm investing not only my money, but also my time and energy. And as you said, my community. Yeah. It is incredibly important for these founders to have access to the right talent, the right advisors, the right board members, et cetera. And I tell every company I invest in, every founder I invest in, if the most value that you got from me is the check I invested, which is between $10,000 and $100,000, then I absolutely failed. My goal is to punch way above the weight of the check.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the approach of leveraging, your superpower of connecting. You are like the ultimate connector. I knew that when I first met you and we were talking there in 1871 and you started rattling off, have you met this person? Have you talked to this person? It's a natural strength of yours. And that's
started at Roycemore.
You learn, okay. So say more about that.
Well, I wouldn't say that I learned it at Roycemore. I like Roycemore was part of that process. I think like your secret move, right? Like your, X-Men superpower is something that you're born with, but you need to exercise that. And I would definitely say Roycemore was the perfect environment for me to sort of take that to the next level, and then Vassar after, and sort of continue from there. But I distinctly remember sitting down in Frank Spica, and actually I think he was probably the only teacher or faculty member at Roycemore that I would call Frank. or call their first name, because I was president my senior year. And I remember sitting down in his office on the couch, very distinctly, having a conversation with him about the year ahead and being president. And he made this comment, and I hope I'm not like, implanting this memory in my head. I know my wife is almost done with her PhD, and I know like memories are very malleable. So hopefully I didn't make this up, but from my recollection, I remember Frank, Mr. Spica, saying, Chris, you're kind of like the glue that holds all of the student body together, because there's so many different cliques and groups and whatever. And even though it's a small student body, there are lots of different types, sort of subgroups, if you will. And you kind of are like the center of the Venn diagram that sort of like allows out, it's sort of like the like hope hub and spoke, sort of thing. And I don't mean that to be like a pat on the back, but it is sort of true. It's just like always been, I just always sort of like to build those relationships with all these different types of people in different communities. And that really did start at Roycemore. And then the other part too is like, if you want to build relationships, you want to build community, you have to engage, you have to get involved.
Right.
And
right.
I hope nobody's engaged more than I did back then, because I think I got into all the colleges that I did because they said, how did you not fail out with literally averaging 13 extracurricular activities a year? I mean, that's scary to even think about, but it like literally was. So yeah, so Roycemore was an integral part of my community building and relationship building.
So 13 activities. I guess nobody said no to you when you wanted to join something. So it's like, okay, you want to do it? You're in. If you want to start that, go for it.
I tried almost everything. I like even yearbook. I think I did my junior year. The funny story, which I've shared with you in the past, is back when I was applying to schools in '92 for '93. We had paper applications for colleges, and the little area where you'd write in your extracurriculars was like absurdly too small. So I had to my mom helped me put together a grid on graph paper. I think the max I had was like 16 one year, and then enough. So it was, or maybe not 1 year, but like 16 total. And then I had to sort of like, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and then the events or the organizations. And I remember I really didn't enjoy yearbook that much. I think I only did that 1 year. There were only like a couple things that I never did. Like I never did any of the acting. And there was like one other thing, but like everything else, I was like, at least once I tried. So that was really fun. I was lucky to be able to do that at a place like Roycemore.
Well, I guess with that respect, you learn what you like, what you're good at, and what you don't like too, right? So you start to narrow in on those things that kind of lift you up, that give you joy, that you find what your superpowers are, and that's as important as finding out what you're not good at, right? So both.
Sure. And I'll also say the best way to build relationships with people are when you're engaging on something like in the trenches, right? So that's why, like when you over engage, when you do lots of different things, you're doing that typically with other people. You're not doing that in a silo unless you're teaching yourself like how to crochet by yourself or like, whatever. But if you're engaging with a community, you're getting to know those people pretty intimately in the trenches and whatever you're doing, whether you're on a board together or you're working on a startup or you're on a basketball team or whatever that is, like a basketball team is a great example. You're doing two-a-days, and when you're doing two-a-days and it's like blood, sweat, and tears, that's when you really get to know people. And that's actually a big part of my, this philosophy I have on hacking serendipity is try to compress the amount of time that it takes to build deep relationships with people. And the best way to do that is engage deeply with them. And that's really something that I was able to do at Royce, because that's probably the reason that I was engaged with all the different communities on campus, other than maybe the drama, because I just couldn't get into drama. To my mom's dismay, I'm sure she's an actress, but.
Well, that's terrific. I want to go back to something you said earlier about the number of companies that you have that you're engaged with now, and it seems to be growing quite a lot. Is there something about this moment during COVID that is really fueling that innovation, that entrepreneurial spirit? And what could some of the rest of us learn from that?
Well, it's no secret that the biggest companies of the next decade are created during the worst parts in our society slash economy. I mean, when you go back, like go back two downturns to like 2000, when we hit the late 2000, 2001 through like 9/11, that's when Google was being built, right? And there were a number of, like, Amazon was already kind of a little bit more established, but Google and others. Fast forward to like the 2008 kind of time frame, we had that other really terrible financial downturn. You had Airbnb come out of that. You had Facebook, and all these like stalwarts of today's economy. Well, the next era is going to be from right now, and it's not necessarily founders starting businesses literally right now in the middle of COVID, although there are some, and
Yeah.
I have invested in some of those, including one that's a 19-year-old dropout from Loyola. Well, hasn't technically dropped out yet, but
Okay.
he will after the semester's over. But what I've really been doing over the past 6, 8 months, however long it's been since March, is out hunting for what are the next companies, but more importantly, founders
Okay.
that are well positioned with the product that they're building right now for the future, based on how COVID is directing, one, consumer behavior, and two, business practices. And there's lots and lots of examples of, like, very basic example of how you can think about how COVID, right now we're in the middle of, we're like in, I don't want to call it the eye of the storm because that's a little bit of a misnomer, but we're in the middle of COVID. But even once COVID passes and we get our vaccines and therapeutics and all that, there will be lingering effects forever to some degree, but certainly strong lingering effects over the next 3 to 5, if not 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you the best example I can think of, because it's very top of mind for us in our prior business, is commercial real estate. Everybody on the planet is doing this all day long. They're on Zoom,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And we had trends prior to COVID where you were doing remote work and sort of flexible schedules where people could work from home one day a week or whatever. And that's really been going on for the past easily 10 to 15, if not 20 years. There was always this concern with management. Can we actually let people work from home? Are we going to lose productivity? Are they going to be screwing around? Like, what's going to happen? And all of a sudden, overnight, the entire planet had to adjust and we all had to work from home.
Yeah.
And all these companies are saying, well, we're doing a pretty good job right now. Zoom seems to be working. We have all these other tools, Basecamp and Google Doc and whatever. Why can't we continue doing this? Well, why are we spending $2 million a month on our rent for our office when we're not even using it now? And when we do go back to the office, maybe we'll have half the people there at any given moment or a third. So you can think about commercial office space as just one example, but a very good and an extremely scary example, because I don't know what this is going to do to the overall economy and all the trickle down effects of this.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one example of how massive COVID will be post COVID, how much we've shifted. It's really a catalyst for shifting consumer behavior and business practices. And frankly, I could go through dozens of examples right now, but that's, I think, the most sort of obvious and probably massive in our future.
Yeah, it's, for education too, of course. So we, at Roycemore, during the summer, we launched Roycemore Online, and we had online summer programming.
Yep.
We ended up being able to offer some programming on campus in the end, but we've leveraged that opportunity to the point that in this winter we're going to be having some additional mini courses available to both Roycemore students and non-Roycemore students, that will be some virtual and some non-virtual. So it opens up market opportunities in a huge way, right? And just the fact that we're having this Griffin Great series, that would not have been something we would have really considered
Mm-hmm.
pre-COVID.
Mhm.
But with, Sarah's creativity about, ways to connect alumni, she launched this, and I think it's been really terrific as ways to build connections and, hopefully to deepen them. Because I know that that's something that you think about a lot and talk about a lot, is it isn't just the massive number of connections, but it's those deep connections.
Mhm.
Because with those, you can really make things happen,
Mhm.
and that's where kind of the magic happens, where there's trust that is built.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, education's a big piece to that too.
And you pointed out one of the many silver linings of COVID. This is a horrible time in our history for a lot of reasons. And hopefully we're about 2.5 weeks away from one of those getting semi-resolved. But COVID has been a massive catalyst for change. Some of that's really bad, some of that is actually really good. And so there are these silver linings of how is society going to evolve? How does this enable us to be closer with people? I was on a Zoom yesterday with one of my closest friends from Vassar that we never really would keep that in touch, but because everybody's so used to Zoom now, we spent an hour chatting. She lives in London, and it's hard to so this is we've normalized this in a way that it was hard to do. I invested in a company that would have been a competitive product to Zoom 10 years ago. It
Mm,
was unfortunately a little bit too early in the curve, and you needed something like COVID to really push adoption, not
right.
make it optional, but mandatory.
Required. You
Right,
had to have the tool,
right,
right?
right.
Because, in this moment, people are looking for tools of how
Yep.
to operate.
And that's what I'm investing in. And I can rattle off dozens of those, but that's literally what I'll have invested in more than 20 companies this year, which is I hope I'll never have that pace ever again because it's way too fast.
You're
Yeah.
busy, busy,
But
busy.
I mean, this is the Black Swan event. I mean, so one quick comment, and if there's any sociologists um, or anthropologists on this, they might know better. But I would hypothesize that this is the singular Black Swan event in our history where all of mankind, literally,
Yes.
all was impacted overnight, everywhere in the world. You could argue, you could try to make that argument for like World War II or some other, but frankly, that's not accurate because
Not as
the
widespread,
US wasn't in the war and they
right?
weren't nearly impacted in the same way until Pearl Harbor. So, literally, once the global pandemic was declared, within 48 hours, the whole planet shut down. I mean, this is one of those instances where I don't think this has ever happened before in the history of mankind because we were all separated by independent bodies of the world, right? And today this is we're a much more interdependent global community because of mass transportation and mass communication. And as a result of that, a pandemic like this moves incredibly fast. So
Yeah,
we had
yeah.
to react like that. And as a result, this is hopefully the only Black Swan event in our life that has this kind of impact. Hopefully we learn from this. Bill Gates was trying to warn us years ago, but hopefully, we learned from this, and hopefully this is our one and only Black Swan event at this level really, and frankly, in the history of, hopefully in the history of civilization. Hopefully we learn from this.
Yeah. I mean, I the other big one I think about that's just not as immediate because it's huge and it's long, it's got a long tail, is climate change. And
Sure, yeah, but that's not
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's unfortunately it's a very, very slow moving car crash, right? Like
right,
and absolutely that is going to affect the entire planet. It's
right.
already affecting, but it's not like a demarcation. Like you
Overnight,
can't
right.
look at March 17th or whatever that date was. There's like, it's sort of like 9/11. Life before 9/11
Yep.
and life after 9/11 were very different. Not in the same
For the
way
US
though.
though, right? Because that was really just for the US,
Right,
like
right,
Pearl Harbor was,
exactly.
a moment for the US, but
Right.
with the COVID pandemic, it's
It's a
been
global
global.
phenomenon, and it was like like maybe there was a small installation in like Antarctica that they can control, but short of that, like every human on Earth really had to adjust their world from business and consumer standpoints. It's pretty, I mean, it's remarkable. So when I saw that, after I sort of panicked from the markets crashing, because this is my full-time job and I don't have cash flow. I don't have a salary. I
Right,
make
right.
very lumpy salary as we have these exits. And, when the markets really dropped, that was a lot of my personal. So I sort of freaked out after that. I calmed from that. I said, okay, you'll never experience something like this again in your life. And that's when I really went spearfishing pretty heavily. So,
Well, it's a tribute to you to see the opportunity that is created in this moment of global crisis, and an opportunity to support startups that are really going to be life changing, to help people live in these challenging times. So, is there I mean, I'm sure you're very proud of all of the ones that you have invested in, but is there any one that you can talk about that you think is particularly exciting for our audience?
I mean, there's a lot of them. I can rattle off a couple quickly that I think are compelling. Just to close the loop on the 19-year-old
Yeah.
student that I turned founder that I just invested in. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say that it's directly going to have tailwinds because of COVID, but it's going to play on our future very well. And COVID is playing a role it will play a role in the adoption of autonomous vehicles. So this young founder, Ian Dillick, was actually just ranked in the top 25 founders under 25 in Chicago, so he is creating a hardware software technology that plugs into autonomous vehicles that
Mm,
enables them to communicate with each other to make roads safer.
terrific.
So that's not a great example. I wouldn't say that that's going to have immediate tailwinds, but I think autonomous vehicles, like we're certainly going to move quickly, or we're going to move quicker into adoption of autonomous vehicles as a result of COVID. That's a conversation for another time. Another company that is definitely going to benefit and is benefiting right now from COVID is called GamerJibe. GamerJibe is a platform that's basically like running around at a video game, but it's a virtual event. So you have a little avatar and you run around to like booths, and you can go look at the various exhibitors in like a virtual hall and talk with those exhibitors. You can look at videos. You can actually and they do really fun things because it's like a video game. You can like literally, if you walk into this, there's like a mat with a virtual boombox, and if you don't do anything, you just start breakdancing. So we've been sort of playing with some ideas of like other fun things that they could do, like why not put a Ferris wheel in somebody's booth so people want to go over to that booth and jump on the Ferris wheel and have all these sort of fun sort of virtual experiences. So that's GamerJibe. I think that one's really, really interesting. One that's not really actually, you could make the argument. No, absolutely, you can make the argument that COVID is actually going to play an important role in adoption of this technology. So I didn't mention this yet, but diversity is really important to me as well. And it's not just investing in diverse founders is the right thing to do, which clearly it is, but there's a very strong business case. And I'll just say very bluntly, being a straight white male that is really has had anything that I've ever needed, dating back to being in private schools, such as Roycemore, since I was a little kid. I like to think of myself as having grit, but it's nowhere near to the level of, let's say, a young Black woman growing up in Chicago, regardless of socioeconomic status, just the dealing with systemic racism and all the barriers that are put in place against somebody like that. When I'm investing in a young Black woman or LGBT or Hispanic, immigrant, like the more diversity, frankly, the better, because that is at the most base level a litmus for grit, and it's a hedge against them failing and giving up. So much of being a founder, especially at the earliest stages, is just having the grit and perseverance to get through those troughs, because this is how the founder experience goes. So
Wow.
anyway,
I love that. Yeah. I love
yeah.
that
So,
you recognize that about the experience of minorities and developing grit in terms of entrepreneurship. That's I've not heard anybody talk about that before, the way that you have so eloquently, and the fact that you're giving them wings is terrific, just really terrific.
Well, and this was a slight tangent. I want to get back to the product, but to finish that tangent, now that I'm getting a little bit more established as an investor and I'm getting a little bit more of a reputation, people are going to listen to this more. And I'm going to not, just talk about it. I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs that if you're not investing in diverse founders, underrepresented founders, you are missing a business opportunity. In fact, the three founders of QB that just exited for, I can't confirm, it was reported to be $100 million exit. I can't confirm or deny that was by Crane's business. You can look that up. I can't say exactly what it was because they haven't disclosed that. But what was reported by Crane's to be a $100 million exit was founded by three, not just minorities, but immigrants, two from India and one from, I don't want to get this wrong. He's of Japanese descent, but I think he's from Singapore. And none of them were American citizens, right? I mean, so like just incredible. Okay, so back to the product that I was going to mention. This will be the last one I'll talk about. The company is called 5 to 9, and it is a platform to help HR professionals measure and manage how do we know what programs are helping with recruiting and retention, specifically for our underrepresented groups. And that's incredibly important because companies, first of all, whether you're doing it for the right reason or not, this is a big moment. I don't think that this is a temporary moment. This is definitely a moment where everybody is thinking it, from Fortune 50 all the way down, we need more diversity in our companies. Some of those, it's window dressing. That sucks, but you know what? I'll take it for now, because the people that say it's, we have to do this for PR, they'll go away and they'll be replaced by people that know that it's also the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So for whatever the motivation is for, across that whole spectrum, it is incredibly important today to bring in diversity.
Makes us all stronger. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Have those different lenses, different perspectives.
I mean, it's a no-brainer, but there are unfortunately a lot of the old guard that just don't really get it, and they're going away. I mean, whether they're retiring or whatever, they're going away, thankfully. And so 5 to 9 will help tell you which programs are actually working and which ones aren't. It's kind of like the old adage with marketing, not interactive marketing, but like display ads or TV ads. 50% of your marketing is working. You just don't know which 50%. And that's kind of true with all these programs that HR people would try to do to help make their employees feel, and this is a dashboard that really gives them visibility in that. And the reason I said, this actually is really applicable is now in an environment where we don't have face-to-face interaction, we don't have the ability to bring people physically into our environment, you need even more of that touch and even more of that ability to understand what's happening with my employees. Are they happy? Are we at risk of losing them? And 5 to 9 can really help with that specifically. So that's another one that I think is really, and actually I reinvested in that as well. That's rare when I will put it. I usually do a sort of initial investment and then just let the company grow. This one I did a re-up in that.
That's terrific. What a great example of a way to lean in this moment to support something that's really important in our world.
Yeah,
that's terrific. Yeah, I want to swing back to your Roycemore experience a little bit, and talk about kind of what experiences you had as a student besides all of those 13 different clubs and activities. But what were the experiences that you can think about that were seminal experiences during your time here that still impact you today on a regular basis?
God, there were a lot of them. Well, so something that I think is very unique about Roycemore that really sets it apart. I don't know if other local or national schools are starting to copy this model, but January short term is really, really a big deal. I mean, it's so far ahead of the curve. Everybody, like a buzzword now in education is experiential and, learning, hands-on, et cetera. Roycemore has been doing that. I mean, that was happening well before I went to the school. And so I could give a couple examples of the experience that I had, but one that was really impactful for me, probably well, I don't know if it was the first time. It was probably the first time that I left the US without my parents, was doing the French exchange program with Madame Whiting. Unfortunately, we lost her a few years ago, but she was just incredible. I mean, she like literally she was the French embodiment of Roycemore. She was such an amazing woman. But every year she would take a group of students from Roycemore to do an exchange program for JST. And I did that. I actually wanted to do that the year that we got into Operation Desert Storm. And unfortunately, we were literally about to board planes, like days before the bombs started dropping in Baghdad. And it was like, I mean, it was literally crazy. So we had to pivot very quickly. That was my sophomore year. I had to jump into Frank Spica's winter ecology program up in Wisconsin, which was also an incredible experience. But so usually how it would work was you'd go for JST, stay with a family for the like 2 or 3 weeks there. And then the following summer, the family that you stayed with would send their their child to live with you. And this year we actually received their child before I went there, because it was, we sort of had this temporal issue because of the war. So there was no international travel for that, obviously. So I actually ended up having Cedric stay with me before, then I went out, and then he stayed with me again afterwards. But just because we created such an incredible relationship. But traveling internationally with only a couple people that living with a family that I did know Cedric there, but I didn't know the parents. They did not speak English hardly at all. Cedric was pretty good in English. I was okay in French. At that point, I had taken 2.5 years of French at Roycemore. So I did okay, but it was hard. It was hard navigating being a foreigner overseas, not really knowing too many people. And that was like really helpful. It was I would say a catalyst for the next sort of step up in maturation. So that was a really exceptional opportunity. I know you're very fortunate and privileged to be able to do something like, even at Roycemore, like, I'm sure there were a lot of kids that wanted to do that, but there's costs and stuff involved. So I really appreciated that opportunity. But yeah, that was a big thing. And also I think the aggregate, and I sort of alluded to this, being able to dabble in so many different things at Roycemore. Had I gone to a really big school, you can't do that as easy, right? You can't just say, well, I'll play basketball and I'll play soccer. I'll be the captain of this and the president of student government, whatever. You can't really do that because there's so many people that you're competing with. And frankly, like Roycemore needs bodies in all those different things, right? Because there's, like they try to offer and you try to offer as many opportunities as you can. But frankly, like if they don't have enough people doing those things, then they don't exist. I mean, my freshman year in high school, we all the boys played baseball, and then we all said baseball sucks, and the baseball team was gone. I don't know if it's still there. I will until the day I die.
You're responsible. If those kids that come to me and say, I want to play baseball, I can say, I know who's responsible for that.
Right. No, I know it came back. Is the baseball team still?
No.
Okay. Well, it did come back, and then I think maybe it went away again. But I mean, whatever. You should start a lacrosse team before you have a baseball team. But anyway, yeah. So I know that's also a very unique thing in being at Roycemore. And if there are any students or parents that are listening right now, one of the things that I would really encourage them to do is experiment. And you said this incredibly well, Adrian. If you try a lot of these different activities, some of those activities you're going to really love, and some of them you're not going to enjoy. And so, like that's really valuable to know that. And by the way, there's also an analog to internships. It's a little bit harder to do internships during high school, but when you go to college, every summer, literally every summer after during college, you should be doing an internship, at least one, if not two, because that is one of the best ways that you're going to get real experience. And further, you're going to be able to say, I thought I wanted to be an architect, but wow, do I not want to be an architect? Or I thought I wanted to be a programmer, but I really don't like what they, like whatever that is. Or maybe you say, no, I really, really like that. I want to do more of that. But it's incredibly important to be able to not just say, I love this, but also know what the things are that you really don't love.
Like. And you can use JST that way too.
Yes.
I know a lot of alumni have shared with me that they did sort of an internship during their 3-week January short term. And, in some cases it led them on to a major in college and then a career.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a luxury to have 3 weeks to do that kind of deep dive.
It's a very college kind of opportunity. Even like college, you don't really have that opportunity in college. It's like this, there's nothing that I could think of, at least where I went, where like everybody mandatory just like sort of stopped classes and you had this block of time that was dedicated to individual study of some area. Or it's just like, it's such an incredibly like forward thinking. If every school in the country isn't doing that today, they should be. And really Roycemore is the leader in that as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're, I think, in our 47th or 48th year of doing
Incredible.
January short term, and we've had other schools that have modeled theirs after ours. So, imitation is the sincerest.
For the 50th anniversary, I will do like an intern or something. I will take on like a if you want to do like a three for the 50th anniversary of that, you can come back at me. I don't know if I could do this every year, but
Terrific.
to celebrate the
like
50th year, we can do that.
I think we just have an idea that has been born, that we need to have a special 50th anniversary JST slate of offerings. So, Chris, thank you for that seed of brilliance. Folks, you heard it here. We got some planning to do.
We'll go out to all the alums, and we can get alums to be peer mentors for individuals.
Oh my gosh, I am super excited about this. All right, so it is 15 minutes of the hour. I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you, and then we're going to open it up to anyone else who might like to ask questions.
Great.
So the first is, several years ago, Roycemore went through a process where we defined our core values as a school, and these were based on kind of historically things that were really meaningful to Roycemore, and their scholarship, community, integrity, respect, and compassion. And so I'm interested to hear from you, of those 5 core values, which resonates most with you and why?
Well, I would probably say option F, all of the above. But since that's not part of I mean, that would be sort of cheating. I will go with option B, community, because I don't think that there's anything more important in this world than I think of community being the amalgamation of all of my relationships, right? It's my community. And if you want to take this at a very meta level, and I'll try not to pontificate too much, but I actually think we might be living in a virtual reality. I've been thinking that for over 20 years. And if that's true, but I actually think that the people in it are sentient beings. Go on a tangent here, but if that's true, then none of this stuff really matters. The only thing that really matters are the other people in this experience and your relationships to them. And so the most valuable thing that I think there is in the world is the relationships you have with other people. So that falls under community for me. Long way of saying it.
I love that. And it's such a huge part of what we are, who we are at Roycemore, and we live and breathe it every day here. So I'm glad that. And
it was really the birth for me. I mean, I was 9 years. I was 4th grade to senior year. And so it really birthed for me, I think, that concept of community. And like very, when you talk about seminal, like that conversation with Frank Spica, when he mentioned, you know, you really are sort of like, you help hold the various communities together as sort of like the high school community. It really, like, it did help me think about that more. So Roycemore is a really important part of that. So it's very fitting that that's one of your, one of the parts of your brand.
Yeah, terrific, terrific. So my next question for you is, what is your definition of success?
I mean, this is a very hard one. I really shy away from living in a capitalist society. Obviously, money is important, but thankfully, and this isn't true for everybody, but thankfully, what I do and what I love, in parts of what I love, lead to making money, lead to being financially, um, uh, I guess you could say successful, but financially safe, right? And I think, like, the most important thing is just like, as long as we can have like financial safety, then Maslow talked a lot about that. But I would say for me, success is, it's like self-actualization, and more importantly, enabling those around you to actualize. And so helping others achieve their potential, helping others achieve the greatness inside of them. Because even if you want to be selfish about that, we can't all do this alone. Like, Trump's a really good example of that. I don't want to make this political, but I love how Trump said from the beginning to probably still now, nobody can do this but me. Nobody can solve the problems but me. And we've seen that time and time again, how wrong that is. Everybody's left his cabinet. You need everybody. You have to be able to rely on those around you, and even those around you that you don't even know, like the scientist that's discovering how to fight COVID, and all these people that, thank God, they're out there doing all this work. So we all are interdependent, whether it's directly or indirectly, on one another. And really, the most value that we can bring to the world is, one, like, achieve your potential. Like, that should be sort of within all of us. But at the same time, how can we help those around us achieve theirs? And if you can do that, then we're all going to win. That's a very sort of like all boats rise kind of mentality, but I think it's very true. And again, like, that really comes from Roycemore too. It's a very, like, it's sewn into the fabric of, I mean, of course I miss the old school, the physical environment, but I think that is part of an ethos that will always be part of Roycemore. It's obviously inside of you as well as the leader of it. And that's why I was so happy to meet you those 3 years ago. Wow, it's crazy to say that, and see that that's the way that you think and operate as well.
Chris, thank you for sharing that. I love your definition of success, and the recognition that we need each other. We can't get there wherever there is for us on our own. That it does take a community. One of our.
And it's not. I mean, why would you want to? Like, it's not fun. I mean, imagine like what would how just it would be. Like, it's like the journey. That's the fun part, and you want to do that with people that you love and trust and want to be with. I mean, like, honestly, that's why I'm so thankful that I'm able to do what I'm able to do, because I am working with the most brilliant, talented, incredibly thoughtful, amazing founders in Chicago. And that's like what could be more fun than that? It's like incredibly fun. So,
well, it clearly lifts your spirit and gives you energy that you feed off
yes.
of. And I love that about you, Chris, because you always carry that with you. Anytime I have a conversation with you, I leave just super excited and supercharged, ready to go conquer the world. So I can see you probably do that for your startups, which is terrific.
I thank ADHD for that. I've got a little like the Energizer Bunny. It sort of like never goes away. But
so for anyone who has ADHD out there, just know it can be your superpower.
It is. I'll talk with anybody that has questions about that. But for real, you have to know how to control it. But it literally is like, I mean, I've got that like Energizer Bunny thing that just won't quit. It's helpful.
Yeah, don't look at it as a weakness. Look at it as your edge.
But understand the downfalls of it and how to manage those. I mean, that's just true of everything.
All right. So my last question before we open it up is, I know you've talked a bit about Roycemore, but in one sentence, what does Roycemore mean to you?
I can do it monosyllabically. Home. Really feels like home.
That's beautiful. Thank you. All right. We have a couple of entrepreneurs of our own, I think, on this call. And I think Sarah may have some questions to bring forward. But Sarah, do you have any questions from the field? Or anyone would like to ask questions? Sarah, if you're talking, you're muted. Oh, okay. All right, hang tight. I think we have someone on the call that you know, Chris, and we're seeing if he wants to come up and ask you a question or say hello.
Great.
And while that's happening, I want to acknowledge two of our seniors who are actually on the call today, who are entrepreneurs in their own right, as young men who had ideas for businesses and have been leaning into COVID as an opportunity to grow their business. So kind of like what you're looking at, Chris, in terms of investing. So Sarah, do we have questions? Quiet. Okay, no questions. All right, well, what I'm going to do is I want to, Chris, share my screen with you to showcase a couple of these, and maybe you can talk about, you could, reflect on what the business is.
Sure.
And see if you have any advice for the startup. So the first one was started by Effie Zimmerman, who you had the opportunity to meet during his freshman year in his JST. And he started this school wellness screener that we are using on a daily basis at Roycemore. And it's an app, and it takes anyone coming onto our campus through a series of questions to make sure that they are clear for being able to enter the building. And then they have a QR code that they present once they've gone through the questions, and we scan that QR code to go into our system so we know that they are actually on campus and have been cleared. And this app is now being used by at least 35 schools across the country. And Effie started this business when he was in 7th grade. He started the Vision Apps business when he was a 7th grader. And I know, Chris, you were a young entrepreneur yourself. So, if you think about the trajectory for yourself as a young person, kind of building business and thinking about entrepreneurship, do you have any advice that you would give Effie or any other entrepreneurs out there?
Well, I'll say this. My entrepreneurial experience in middle school, if Effie was building apps in 7th grade, he would, maybe it's not fair to compare. It's a little bit apples and oranges from the mid 80s to now, but it was a lemonade stand. I took it very seriously. I think you probably heard the story on the other interview, but we certainly weren't doing something as technically cool as building apps. So that's, I would say that Effie's already pretty far ahead of where I was at that point in my life. Um, and great experience. I mean, also the fact that if he's doing this with 35 different schools around the country, the experience, the biggest thing that you need to learn in business, in my opinion, is relationships. And as crazy as it sounds, like I learned that with the lemonade stand. I could get into that, but I'm not going to. If Effie is working with schools in 35 schools in various states, he's having to talk to them. He has to find out what things are working, what things aren't working, get their feedback, incorporate that feedback back into the product, and then iterate and get more feedback. And what are users saying? What's the client saying? Because you've got all these different people that you need to be managing, from your client who's paying you to their users that are using it, your team that's trying to build it, and the gaps between what you can technically and feasibly do cost effectively versus what they're asking for, and how to prioritize. I mean, there's so much in that is incredibly valuable. And just the best way to learn that is to do it. You're not going to learn that in a class. I do a lot of mentoring at Kellogg, which for those that don't know is the business school at Northwestern. And they teach classes on entrepreneurship. And the way that they do that is basically the classes are me and other of my peers that are either investors or founders, et cetera, sit around and judge the products that these people are building. And they're going on talking to people outside of the classroom. And so, I mean, you can take classes that help walk you through that. But if you really want to do this, just go and build a business. And it's so easy to do now. I don't mean it's so easy to do like, hey, I can build a business and make it profitable, but there are tools that help you, not help you. There are tools that enable you to do things like there was no such thing as mobile apps back when I was in middle school. So that's why I said it's a little bit apples and oranges. There was software, like, my cousin started a software business while he was in high school. I didn't do that. He was coding. That wasn't interesting to me, but you can use platforms now that are like no code, right? Like you can literally build apps, mobile apps and web apps. You don't have to know how to code at all. So there are ways that you can build things today that was very hard to do even 5 or 10 years ago. So just jump in. And I really was thankful to my father that he sort of grabbed me by the collar, metaphorically, and said, like, you're going to start this lemonade stand and we're going to do this like a real serious business. And I learned so much from that. And I really encourage anybody that's like sort of thinking about doing something. Like, the biggest thing this is the most, if you take away one thing from the entire conversation, not Roycemore and sort of like the fun and love of Roycemore related, but like on the entrepreneurship side of this, if you take away one thing, it's, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you want to start a business that's going to be successful, you have to find a problem that you absolutely hate. You have to hate that problem so much that if you don't solve it, it's going to terrorize you for the rest of your life. And that passion, that hate for that problem, and the love for the solution of what you're trying to create to solve that problem is what's going to get you through those downturns, right? And it just so happens that, like, those that have more grit from diversity or whatever, they can go a little bit deeper in those troughs and still recover. So it's really important. Find a problem. I can go through lots of problems that I found in my life that I wanted to solve and am currently in process of solving. Lofty Ventures is actually solving one of them. Like, how can we help early stage founders in Chicago and get them the resources they need? It's a problem I'm trying to solve. So you could kind of call what I'm doing entrepreneurial, but it's sort of a flip on it. But I think that's the most important thing. Best advice I can give to a founder or potential founder or entrepreneur is hate the problem, love the solution with everything in your soul.
Love it. That's awesome. I want to share with you the other company that I mentioned. The founder of this company is working right now, so he's not able to come on screen, but he clearly hated the problem of being dirty. So he started a soap company. This is the Sudsy Goat bath company. And during the lockdown and the pandemic, he actually expanded from just handmade soaps, which are all natural ingredients, to bath salts and sugar scrubs. So, yeah, they've been reviewed by the Evanston Roundtable. I mean, it's just terrific that we have this entrepreneurial spirit among our students.
No,
And
it's great.
and I hope that we can cultivate that even more in the years ahead, because I think that um, the skills that are part of being an entrepreneur are the skills that are really important in the world today, whether you have your own business or
Mhm,
you are innovating in another business, that
mhm.
those are essential critical skills that are going to become more and more valuable to be able to be successful in life.
But critical reasoning, problem solving, breaking through barriers. When somebody says you can't do something, figure out how to do it. I mean, at the core of what entrepreneurship is. And whether you become an entrepreneur or not, having entrepreneurial experience and entrepreneurial experiences really valuable. There's a nonprofit that's based out of 1871 that Lofty Ventures has partnered with this year called Future Founders.
Mhm.
And it literally uses entrepreneurship and lean methodology, which some people may know what that is basically just means um, uh, product driven and customer driven product development. uh, it uses these methodologies as a way to teach kids and really very specifically underserved kids in our schools in middle and high school. And it is whether those kids decide I want to be a founder of a company or I want to do whatever, those skills that they learn in those exercises and in those activities with future founders will live with them forever. I mean, those will, if you ask one of those kids, if one of those kids ended up going to Roycemore and you asked them the question you asked me, what was one of those really seminal moments? They're going to say it was that experience I had with future founders where we had to learn and iterate how to build this structure with just these materials. Like that's where when you're forced to problem solve in work through constraints, I mean, that's really incredibly valuable. So yeah, as we sort of discussed before, I'm certainly happy to help build more entrepreneurial programs and initiatives at Roycemore.
Terrific. Well, there is much more to come. Chris, I know I could continue talking to you for hours. There's always so much that we could talk about and that's exciting to be thinking about, but we'll have to kind of hang on to that for a future episode. Maybe we'll bring you back for a rerun or a new topic on Griffin Greats in the future.
You could
But
have a panel. You could have a couple of bring in Shamar and some of the others on. We could be part of a panel.
that would be fun. That would be fun. Well, thank you again, Chris, so much for lending your time and talent and wisdom to us from Ann Arbor, where you are right now. We are so grateful to have your engagement as an alum with Roycemore.
Thank you. I really enjoy it. And to everybody that watches this now and in the future, um, if I can be of help, I certainly would love to. Go Griffins.
Go Griffins. Thanks, everybody. Have a
Take
great
care. Thank
week.
you.
Bye-bye.